faith can identify with it, even though they may not necessarily believe in those exact texts or may not be familiar with those exact texts. However, the language of spirituality is one. Everybody can understand and relate exactly to what I'm talking about. In the Bible, it mentions about the Antichrist, right? You guys have heard about you're looking at me like I'm speaking a whole other language. No, it mentions about the Antichrist in the Bible. And it mentions, he is also mentioned in the Qur'an as well. Signs of the last days are mentioned in the Bible, right? And are mentioned in the Qur'an, that there will be signs. And the signs that are mentioned in the Qur'an are most of the same signs that are mentioned in the Bible. The Bible and the Qur'an are not too much different in terms of the universal language of spirituality. The language is pretty much the same, all right? So as we're talking about this topic of stress, how many of you in here are stress-free? One. Lucky guy. Would that I were in your shoes. Okay, so as human beings, we have a limit to our mental capacity, right? There's a limit to everything. God has put limits on everything for our benefit, all right? And sometimes, because of these limits, we are susceptible to being inundated or being overwhelmed because there's too much, maybe information or too much of a situation, and sometimes we find ourselves overwhelmed with things because of our limitations. And most of the time, our ambitions in this world, whether financially or whether socially, whether religiously, spiritually, sometimes those contribute to us being overwhelmed at times. And with the advancements of technology, right, it has created its own brand of ADD. Anyone know what ADD is? Huh? Okay. It's where you can't focus and pay attention too long, all right? And to add to that, there's a guy, his name is Nicholas Carr, and he wrote a book titled The Shallows, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains. So I'm going to read you a quote from him, just to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about. He said, when we go online, we enter into an environment that promotes cursory reading, distracted thinking, superficial learning, even as the internet grants us easy access to vast amounts of information. It is turning us into shallower thinkers, literally changing the structure of our brains. You guys concur with that? The internet is making us very shallow and is definitely changing the way, and it makes it hard for us to focus. He goes on to say that that the internet, that it affects the way that we process information, and that in itself complicates our ability to reflect, to ponder, reflect, to critically analyze, all right? And all of these things are components that make us human beings, the ability to reflect and ponder. Today, I remember there was a time when I could write an academic journal or a piece of work, and it could be 20 pages and people would read the whole 20 pages. Today, you have 140 characters to get your point across, right? To get your point across in 140 characters, and that itself is shallow because there's not enough information in 140 characters to get my point across. Which means that when you look at those 140 characters and you try to discern what the person is saying, we say, oh wow, that's nice, and we retweet it or we favorite it. Sometimes we don't even read it. The person posted it, we like that person, so we just favorite it, right? You never even read it. We read the first line, the first sentence. If it's catchy enough, to hold your attention long enough, you may read the first paragraph, but anything after that, that's it. It even applies to, applying for a job. Resumes today, right? Resumes can't even fill up a whole page because they don't want to look at it. I've been part of the process of the hiring process, and I've literally looked at a page, and maybe it's stapled, so it's 2 pages of a resume, and you just toss it you don't even look at it, you toss it to the side. Because it's too long. Who has time to read 2 pages of a resume? And that's, I'm giving you that one for free. That's a jewel that I'm giving you for free. So when you leave here, when you graduate and you go for a job, keep that in mind as short as possible, short and to the point. The point that I'm making is that components like critical analyzing, critical thinking, reflection, pondering, these are all components that make us a human being. There's a verse in the Qur'an where Allah says, and I'm going to read the verse in Arabic and then I'll translate it in English. He said, كم من آية في السماوات والأرض يمرون عليها وهم عنها غافلون. And how many signs are there in the heavens and in the earth that people pass by on a daily basis while they are completely heedless? How many? Because we don't take the time to reflect. There was a full moon a few days ago. Moon sitting in the middle of the sky, full, bright. And how many of us noticed it? Okay, we got one. Special. Right? And I mean, it doesn't mean that, you are detached, but it does mean that there is a heedlessness there, that these are signs that are clearly, God put here clearly for a reason. And if these are signs in the earth, in the heavens and the earth, even signs within yourself that we ignore, red flags that we ignore within ourselves, whether indicating that we are sick, whether indicating that we are, possibly changing for the worse, and we ignore these signs because we're somewhat detached, because we don't take the time out to ponder and reflect. We go from class to headphones to TV to the computer screen. It's always one thing after another, never time to yourself. How many of you just on a Sunday, on a day like today where it's raining outside, nothing really going on, you just take the time out to just sit and reflect about your life, about, 1, 2 people, And I'm sure there's probably more, some of you guys are probably shy, but the point that I'm making is that we have to have time to ponder and reflect. And when we don't have time to do this, it begins to impact the way that we receive and process information. And stay with me because I'm leading up to the point of stress, all right? So this begins to, affect our intellect. In addition to these things, Prophet Muhammad prophesies, may peace and blessings be upon him, that a time would emerge where intelligence would be completely absent from human interaction. That there would be no intellect. And you see that now. The way that people behave on the internet, it affects the way that they behave, in person, right or wrong. A person may act differently towards you online, and then when you see them in person, it's a whole different story. All right, because online you can be whoever you want to be. You can be a tough guy, you can be a tough girl, and then when you run into the person, it's just like, they act like they don't see you, they act like they didn't say whatever they said to you online, or they make these innuendos online about you, not necessarily directly toward you, but about you. All right, we all have people who do that. And this even happens with relationships. I've seen husband and wife. I'm also a marriage counselor. I've seen husband and wife get into an argument and the wife will go take to Facebook or Twitter and begin to say little things, innuendos about their spouse. That's not the way that we handle. That's not human interaction. That's not the way that we solve problems as spouses. I can't tell you how many marriages have dissolved because of this. That you have an argument with your spouse and then you rush to Facebook, people need to learn to stop doing this and this and this, and you're talking about your spouse. That's not, where's the intellect in that in terms of the human interaction, your interpersonal skills? So Prophet Muhammad, he prophesies that there will come a time where intelligence would be removed from human interaction. He said, تكون فتنة تعرج فيها عقول الرجال حتى ما تكاد ترى رجلا عاقلا. He said that there will be great trials and tribulations towards the last days. He said, and the intellects of people will be removed. He said, to you will be hard pressed to find an intelligent person from amongst you. And this was also explained in another narration, another statement of his. I'll skip over that for the shortness of time. And it's important for us to reflect and understand the cause and effect. When he said that there would be a time where intellect would be removed, what are the things that led up to that point? A lot of times in religious texts, we'll read things, in terms of this happening or that happening, but we don't concentrate on the events that will precipitate those things happening. It's just not going to happen out of the blue, but there will be events that will lead up to that. Just like there will be events that will lead up to people accepting the Antichrist as God. The Antichrist was described, the Dajjal as we know him, was described as someone who has one eye, right? And he will be a man that comes from the area of Syria. And he will be like this in the descriptions. And you will say to yourself, how does an individual accept something like that to be God? How does that happen? How do we just wake up one day believing in this unseen God above the heavens, and then one day we believe in this one-eyed man who appears out of nowhere to be God? How does that happen? There are some events that lead up to that. It's not just that we wake up one day and believe that someone is God. But Prophet Muhammad also prophesies that there will be years that will go by of deception, wherein the liar will be believed and the person that is truthful will be deemed a liar. The scales will flip. And you see that even now today. We love people that lie to us. We like to believe a lie. I think someone even made a song about that, right? I love the way you lie. Right? No, it's true though. We like, especially women, you like when a man lies to you. The guy that's going to do right by you and do the right thing, he never gets a break. But the guy that's going to lie to you and cheat on you and beat you and demean you and disrespect you, right? You take him all day long. Right or wrong? Guys, fellas, right or wrong? True. Right. So why will people believe in the Antichrist? Because they will be so used to believing, so accustomed to believing people lying to them, that it will be second nature. It will be second nature because people don't critically analyze anymore. They don't, critically think about things anymore. They just accept. We just accept. So with all of these things happening, we need to ask ourselves, well, what is intellect? What is intellect? I'm asking you. It's not a didactic lecture. This is interaction. What is intellect? We're talking about the intellect being removed and, yes.
Intellect is the ability to understand something.
Okay, good. Anyone else? Intellect. You all have one. Please tell me. What is it?
Using your reasoning skills.
There you go. The capacity to use logic and reason. Okay? The capacity to use logic and reason, as well as navigate through events that arise in your life. That is intellect. All right? The capacity to use logic and reason and the ability to navigate through different occurrences, different events that arise in your life. Okay? So when we talk about intellect being removed, we're talking about the lack of ability to navigate through situations as they arise in your life. This is why people commit suicide. One of the reasons why people commit suicide, because they don't know how to navigate through situations. This is one of the reasons why people find themselves in and out of marriages, okay? Because they don't know how to navigate. They don't know how to navigate. Men tend to look at women and say that, you should handle the situation like I do, not failing to see the differences between men and women. Different, they handle situations differently, okay? Navigating through things, that comes with intellect, okay? And as well as some other things that he mentioned that will lead up to the increase in despair and stress and things like this. Another matter that Prophet Muhammad mentioned that will take place during the last days is despair. Despair. Anyone know what despair is? What is despair? Somebody else. Somebody else. Yes. A state of hopelessness. Good. Anyone else? Yes.
Sadness due to hopelessness.
Say it again.
Extreme sadness due to extreme hopelessness.
Okay. Extreme sadness that leads to extreme helplessness. Okay, great. Is there anyone in here that's going through despair right now? That's extremely sad? Feels extremely hopeless? All of you probably do. You just don't want to say it. It's okay. And that's that contributes to the problem, is that people don't seek help when they have these issues. And then you'll find a person, put on a black jacket, walk into a college campus and just start shooting because they are going through these extreme circumstances and they don't get help. Or we see people going through these things and we don't encourage them to go get help. We just mind our business. That's not my problem. But it will be your problem if the person turns out to, make you their victim. But extreme despair, it has an effect on people. But Prophet Muhammad mentioned that there will be times towards the last days where people they will fall into extreme despair, extreme state of hopelessness where they literally give up on life. He mentioned in a hadith, he said, لا تقوم الساعة حتى يمر الرجل على القبر فيقول لوددت أني مكان صاحبه لما يلقى الناس من الفتن. He said that the final hour will not come until a man passes by a grave and he says that I wish I was in the place of the person that is in that grave. He desires to be dead because of all of the problems that he is, confronted with. Okay, so these are times of extreme despair. So let me ask you, what type of situation do you think would create this type of despair where a person would wish that they were dead? And we live in times like that where people have literally committed suicide.
Long-term unemployment.
Long-term unemployment. Okay. Yes.
Loss of relationships.
Loss of relationships. Okay. Anyone else? That would create a state of hopelessness where you feel like you wish you were dead. Anyone else? Divorce. Have you ever been divorced before?
No. Personal experience.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
Loss of something that I feel like you made your center. I'm being a little general, but anything like you made your center.
Okay. Loss of anything that you made the center of your existence.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Fellas, come on. Yes.
Lack of purpose.
Lack of purpose. You feel like there's a lack of purpose in your life. Okay.
Failing an exam.
Failing
an exam.
an exam. Okay. Do all of you guys fall into despair when you fail an exam? You feel like I just want to quit, I want to throw the towel in, I just want to go back home?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I could.
I've been there. I know exactly how it feels. So sometimes we get overwhelmed with, our circumstance, and it strips us of our ability to be optimistic. What is optimism? What is optimism? Being positive. Okay. Someone else. Optimism.
Being hopeful.
Being hopeful. Anyone ever heard of the cliche, the see the glass half full, half empty? Okay. An optimist sees opportunity in every trial, while a pessimist sees trial in every opportunity. In every opportunity they see trial, tribulation, oh, woe is me. But an optimist is the one that every opportunity, every situation, every trial or tribulation is an opportunity to do better, to be better, to achieve better, right? That's an optimist. How many of you, by a show of hands, would consider yourself an optimist? Honestly. So the vast majority of you are pessimists.
A realist.
A realist?
Yeah.
So you're cutting down the middle,
Yeah.
in between the two. Okay, a realist. Well, there's a fine line between realism and pessimism.
As with optimism.
You're right. Okay. So the thing about it is that as someone who believes in God, all right, and I'll use Islamic reference, but I'm speaking to anyone who believes in God. There's an air of optimism with everyone who believes in God, especially when you believe that God is omnipresent, that you believe that He is powerful, almighty, and that He can do anything. When you have those beliefs and those beliefs are rooted in you, the sky is the limit, and the world is yours for the taking. You don't fall into pessimism. You believe that any situation God puts you in is, number one, something that you could handle, because God doesn't burden you more than you can handle. All right? Because you're looking at life through a spiritual lens. You're looking from a spiritual perspective when you look at life. You're saying that, number one, God is not going to put something on me that I can't handle. There's a verse in the Qur'an where Allah says, "La taziru waziratu wizra ukhra," that Allah does not place a burden on a soul. The verse is, yes, that God does not place a burden on a soul more than it can bear. That Allah does not place a burden on a soul more than it can bear. And the verse is actually slipping the verse in Arabic. Nonetheless, that's what it is in English. That God doesn't place a burden on you more than you can handle. That's number one. Number two is that you realize that anything that befell you, anything that befalls you, is what was already written. Because as Muslims, we believe in divine decree. The qadr. We believe that things were preordained, predestined. Right? And we are carrying out, and I mean, we have our own free will to do or not to do. Nonetheless, even our own free will is still within the boundaries of the will of God. And we never go outside of that. So even though something befalls us, calamity, we understand that this was something that we would not have been able to escape anyway. And any good or prosperity that comes to us, then it was already something that was written for us. There's a verse in the Quran where Allah says, وَمَا أَصَابَ مِن مُصِيبَةٍ إِلَّا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فِي السَّمَاءِ إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ مِن قَبْلِ أَن نَّبْرَأَهَا إِنَّ ذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ يَسِيرٌ لِكَيْ لَا تَأْسَوْا عَلَى مَا فَاتَكُمْ وَلَا تَفْرَحُوا بِمَا آتَاكُمْ. That he says in the verse that there is no calamity that befalls you on the earth or within yourselves except that it was already preordained, predestined. And it was written in a book before he brought it into existence, brought it into fruition. He said, and this is so that you do not fall into despair over the things that passed you by, and that you do not become overly joyous or arrogant because of the things that were given to you. You take a middle course between the two. You understand that whatever calamity befell you, that it was something that was already written. That whatever happened to you was never going to miss you. Whatever hit you was never going to miss you, and what missed you was never going to hit you. How many of you guys believe in the qadr, divine preordainment? As a Muslim, you should raise your hand because that's part of our belief system. You guys don't believe that life or events and occurrences in your life were preordained to happen?
Well, to a certain extent, yes, but as Christians, there's more focus on free will. So
More focus on free will. Okay.
well, at least what I believe. So
No, it's okay. It's okay. There's no right or wrong. If that's what you believe, that's what you believe. Who am I to say your belief is wrong? That's not my job. I believe what I believe, and I'm comfortable with that. And the thing is that when you believe that things were preordained, it helps you to navigate through whatever trial or tribulation you're going through in your life, because you understand, number one, as I mentioned, that God does not put anything on you more than you can handle. Number two is that whatever missed you was never going to hit you, and what hit you was never going to miss you. And these are things that help you to cope with life. You'll find a lot of people who commit suicide. A lot of these people are not religiously inclined. They're not religious. They believe that life is what it is, and they take life as it comes to them without having any religious guidelines, any spiritual manual to follow to help them navigate through these things. I myself was a product of that. There was a particular time in my life when I deviated from Christianity, and I just called myself believing in God. That's all I do. I believe in God. All of this religion stuff is not for me. I could care less about this stuff. I know I believe in God, and that's it. And I found myself, just making a mess of my life because I didn't have a manual. I didn't have structure. I didn't have boundaries. I wasn't conscious of God. Although I believed in Him. All right, because there are many people that will say they believe in God, but are not actually conscious of God at the time that they're doing the things that they're doing. And there's a difference between believing in God and being conscious of God. And we have a word in Arabic that, points to being conscious of God, which is called taqwa. Taqwa, which is being constantly in the remembrance of God. You know, at the time that you're engaging in certain behaviors, you are conscious of God at that time. Everyone believes in God. Even the devil believes in God, right? The devil believes in God. The conversation in the Bible as well as in the Qur'an between the devil and God. That's an indication that he believed in God. God asked him, why didn't you prostrate to Adam when I commanded you to? He said, because you created me, right? So that is an acknowledgement that he acknowledged God as his creator. You created me from fire. You created him from dirt. I'm better than him. So he never denied, Satan never denied the existence of God. That wasn't his sin. His sin, which was the greatest of all sins, is what we know today as racism. That was his sin. I'm better than him. Because I'm from fire, he's from dirt. I'm better than him because I'm Arab and he's not Arab. I'm better than him because I'm white and he's black. I'm better than him because I'm this and I'm black and she's white, right? And every culture, every ethnicity has their share of this particular, this issue that, Satan had, okay? So his issue was not that he didn't believe in God, all right? His issue was that he was too arrogant to follow the commandment of God when he commanded him. So let's go back to the thing that I think you mentioned. One of the things that create despair is finances, right? Who said finances? I think it was you, right? That is one of the greatest creators of despair, when you fall into debt and you believe that there's no way out for you of this situation. I'll give you one example, and then I'll end here, because I think I have 2 minutes. I wear contacts, so I can't really see.
Yeah.
Prophet Muhammad entered into the mosque one day, and he saw a young man sitting, and signs of anxiety could be seen on the individual. And Prophet Muhammad asked him, why are you sitting in the mosque at a time when it's not time for prayer? He said, because I'm overwhelmed with anxiety and grief and stress because of debts that I have. And Umar bin al-Khattab, radiallahu anhu, he said, لو كان فقر رجلا لقتلته, that if poverty was a man, I would kill him. Because poverty drives people to do things that they would not normally do, right? We all know the hadith of the 7 people who will be promised paradise, or promised shade on a day where there will be no shade except the shade of Allah, right? And one of those 7 is a man who made an offer to a woman to be intimate with her, all right? And the woman refused. But time went by and she fell on hard times, and she came back to take him up on that offer, right? But you see what poverty did. Poverty drove her to do something that in a normal circumstances she would not have succumbed to. But she came back and she said, I'll take you up on the offer, and he gave her the money. And when the guy got down between her legs, the woman looked up at him and said, do not do this except with do right, meaning by marriage. Don't take this except with do right. Fear Allah, fear God. And the man looked at her and, was, astonished, surprised by, her ability to fear God even under these circumstances. And he got up off of her and he told her to, keep the money, and he asked God for forgiveness. And this is one of the 7 people that will be shaded on a day where there will be no shade except the shade of God. And that is a man who is enticed by someone, a man who, is in a situation and he, regains his consciousness of Allah and learns to fear Allah and not go through with the situation. All right. But he was overcome with grief and stress because of debt. And Prophet Muhammad said to him, can I teach you some words that if you utter these words, Allah will remove your grief from you and settle your debts for you? Wouldn't you like to know what he said? As a Muslim, you should have the little book pocket. It can fit right in your pocket. It's called Husnul Muslim, the Fortress of the Muslim. It's a compilation of supplications throughout the day, throughout the night, and no good Muslim should leave home without it. It should be in your pocketbook, it should be in your car, it should be in your backpack, it should be wherever. And anytime you're sitting around, you're not doing nothing, to open the book and memorize these supplications. But he told him to say, when you go to sleep or when you wake up, "O Allah, I seek refuge with you from debt, all right?" And the hadith the supplication is kind of long. You can go back and look up the actual dua itself. But overall, he was asking Allah to protect him from debt. Even Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him, sought refuge with Allah from being in debt. Because being in debt and being overcome with, debt, it puts you in a situation where you fall into hopelessness, fall into despair. So I'm gonna leave you with some things that can help you if you find yourself in this situation. Number one, if you find yourself in stressful situations, you find yourself in despair, a state of hopelessness, pray. Pray. It sounds very simple, but it actually works. And along with prayer is being patient, because there are things that God tests us with to help us better our human experience. All right? Tests that God give us is for us. Right? It's to make us better. And mind you, God doesn't test you with more than what you can handle.